Welcome back to the Deep Dive. You've tuned into a really crucial deep dive today. We're focusing on some recent, pretty impactful changes to vital programs that affect millions of Americans. Benefits, economic relief, the very structure of our support systems. Our mission today, it's really to cut through all the noise you might be hearing out there. We want to help you understand the new rules, figure out who's most affected, and really get what this all means for your household, your family, your community. We're aiming for those aha moments, giving you the knowledge quickly but thoroughly without that feeling of just being overloaded with information.
Exactly. And we've zeroed in on three major areas we need to explore. Each one has, pretty significant implications. First, we'll dig into the stricter work requirements. These are now in effect for SNAP benefits. This is a big one. Second, we'll tackle the heated debates and, frankly, the administrative shifts impacting Social Security, a program so many people rely on. And finally, we're going to assess the renewed conversations around potential stimulus checks and this interesting idea of tariff rebates.
Okay, so if you're ready to get informed without getting bogged down, let's unpack this. We're starting with something that just became very real for millions when it's changes to SNAP benefits. All right, let's jump right in. As of September 1st, 2025, there's been a major policy shift. Stricter work requirements for SNAP recipients are officially in effect. This isn't just talk. It's law now, and it's already impacting people. So here are the core new requirements you need to know about. Able-bodied adults without dependents, they now have to work at least 20 hours a week. That works out to roughly 80 hours a month.
And just to clarify, for SNAP, able-bodied usually means 18 to 50, not pregnant, not caring for a young child, and no certified disability preventing work.
Right. And here's a point that I think many listeners will find, striking and definitely controversial. There are new age rules. Individuals between 55 and 64 years old, they are no longer exempt. They now have to meet that same 20-hour work requirement.
That's a huge change for that group. But it's crucial to remember, while these new rules are stricter, some existing exemptions do remain. For instance, if you're caring for a child under 15, or you have a documented serious health condition, or if you're 65 or older, you're still exempt.
Okay, that's important.
But for those who do have to meet the requirement, the big change is needing documentation. Things like pay stubs, proof of work hours, and that adds, a whole new layer of administrative burden. The system's already complex.
So what's the official line? Why are they doing this? The administration's been pretty clear, right? Vice President J.D. Vance laid it out. He stated benefits are for U.S. citizens who've contributed, not for, quote, illegal immigrants or able-bodied Americans who refuse to work. They're framing it as a push for fairness, encouraging people back into the workforce, making sure the system isn't abused.
That's definitely the administration's stated goal, accountability. But when you look at how this actually hits, say, that 55 to 64 age group, critics argue this idea of fairness might actually create new inequities, maybe even unintended consequences.
How so?
Well, many in that age group might have health issues. Not things officially deemed a serious condition, maybe, but things that still make physical labor really hard. And then there's the real problem of age discrimination in hiring. That's a factor.
Absolutely.
Plus, many are informal caregivers, looking after grandkids or elderly parents, responsibilities that aren't always captured by official exemptions. Analysts estimate that around 2.5 million Americans could potentially lose their benefits because of these new rules.
Wow, 2.5 million. That's a critical distinction then. The intention might be one thing, but the effect could really burden people genuinely trying to get by. Has the administration offered specific data showing how these rules will help this specific group find work rather than just cutting benefits?
Their focus really has been more on the principle of work requirements and the long-term fiscal health they believe it brings. They argue that a strong economy, it provides opportunities.
Okay.
But the data from critics points to these very real practical hurdles. That existing mountain of paperwork, it now includes proving you worked. That creates a huge risk of losing benefits, even if you're eligible, just because of a missed deadline or a documentation error. This is where the rubber meets the road for millions.
It really makes you think. I heard from someone recently, 58 years old, lost his manufacturing job. Now he's facing this requirement. He's not officially disabled, but finding 20 hours a week of suitable work at his age with a bad back that isn't serious enough for exemption, it's a huge challenge.
Exactly. And that story, it's unfortunately not unique. It just highlights how these official categories often miss the real-world complexities, the invisible barriers people face.
So just to quickly recap who's most affected, parents with kids under 15, exempt. people aged 55 to 64. They're now squarely in the hot seat. That's definitely the most controversial part.
Right. Veterans are also included, unless they're disabled. That's caused significant pushback, as you can imagine. And folks over 65 remain exempt.
What's really insightful here, I think, is understanding how these SNP changes happened. They weren't standalone, were they? They were embedded within a much larger Trump administration bill, one that also included major spending cuts and tax reforms.
That's a crucial point. It's not just a simple policy tweak. It's a political maneuver.
Yeah.
By bundling these things together, it makes challenging just one provision, like the work requirements, incredibly difficult.
Ties its fate to broader fiscal goals, forces a whole different kind of legislative fight.
Precisely. And it sets a precedent for how essential support systems can be reframed or, well, altered. And the ripple effect on communities is going to be substantial when potentially millions lose food aid. That puts immense strain on local food banks, churches, community groups.
Which then impacts schools, neighborhoods.
Even healthcare systems. The overall well-being of the community can decline. And just to give you a practical glimpse, in some states, like Texas, your SNP payment date depends on your EDG number, your eligibility determination group number.
Okay.
It's basically a case ID determining your schedule. The exact dates vary, but the takeaway is you need to be hyper-aware of your local office's specific plan. Small admin details matter.
Which brings us to the crucial question. What can recipients actually do right now?
The best advice is stay proactive. Check your mail constantly for official notices, watch for updates from your local benefits office, and crucially, keep meticulous copies of everything. Pay stubs, work hours, documentation.
Especially if you're in that 55-64 group.
Absolutely. If you're in that newly affected 55 to 64 age group, start planning now. How will you meet those 20 hours? How will you document it? Don't wait.
The struggles we've just been talking about, for that 55-64 group trying to meet work requirements for SNAP, it really highlights the broader pressures on older Americans. And it's actually a perfect segue into our next big topic, Social Security, a program that, for so many, is the absolute bedrock of financial stability in retirement. And it's facing its own intense debates. The big question everyone asks, is Social Security going bankrupt? And this isn't just financial anymore, is it? It's become a deeply divisive class issue in America.
Yeah, you hear two main arguments constantly. On one side, often represented by, wealthier folks or certain policymakers, they argue for raising the retirement age. The logic is people are living longer, men to around 83, women to about 85 on average. So they say the current system is financially unsustainable as it stands.
But then the other side comes back hard, predominantly the working class. They argue vehemently against raising the retirement age. They point to the brutal physical toll of decades in labor-intensive jobs. And they ask, what about our national priorities? Especially when you look at the scale of war spending or tax breaks for the wealthy.
It's really worth digging into that life expectancy versus reality point. Because while yes, overall life expectancy is up, the quality of those later years, it's vastly different for someone who worked construction versus someone with a desk job.
That makes sense.
So for many, pushing retirement further isn't just an inconvenience. It's a significant burden on bodies that are already worn out. It makes later retirement a much greater hardship.
And this connects directly to what many call the follow the money argument. Critics are saying, hey, it's not Social Security that's straining the national finances. It's massive war spending. We're talking billions, potentially trillions, poured into wars post 9/11, Iraq, Afghanistan. And today, money keeps flowing. Ukraine, Israel. For Ukraine aid alone, the official numbers are huge, around $184 billion.
Right. And other estimates put it at $130 billion. Then you had former President Trump claiming $300 billion. The true figure, it's murky, probably higher than official numbers suggest, but the sheer scale is undeniable.
Yeah.
So the core question becomes one of priorities, doesn't it? Should we be sending hundreds of billions overseas while seniors right here at home are trying to scrape by on, say, $1,500 a month? It highlights a really stark contrast.
And speaking of the system itself, we actually have some significant news. There are major changes happening right now at the Social Security Administration, under the Trump administration. This includes new leadership appointments, chief of staff, chief actuary, chief of communications, a whole slate of new people. They're also restructuring operations into three main areas: field operations, processing centers, and digital services, and consolidating all security functions. The administration claims this has already led to improvements. Things like reduced phone wait times, they say, from 30 minutes down to under 10, field office waits down 30%, a faster online portal.
Well, Given the public's past experiences with the SSA, it's probably fair to acknowledge some healthy skepticism about those claimed improvements.
Sure.
The agency's reputation for efficiency hasn't always been stellar, so it'll take consistent, tangible changes for people to really feel the difference. The proof, as they say, will be in the pudding.
Looking ahead, there's the expected cost of living adjustment, the COLA, for 2026. It's projected to be around 2.7%.
Okay.
So for the average retiree getting about $1,500 a month right now, that's roughly a $37 bump. Brings their check to $1,537. Now, it's worth noting that CLA boost will feel a little, well, juicier for retirees in states with higher median benefits to begin with. As of late 2024, the top 10 were places like New Jersey, Connecticut, Delaware, New Hampshire, Maryland. You get the idea. Higher benefit states see a slightly bigger dollar increase from the percentage.
Right, but 2.7%. We need to talk about whether that's enough.
Exactly. Despite that CLA, Representative John Larson recently dropped what felt like a bombshell in Congress. He stated that more than 5 million Americans are receiving below poverty-level Social Security checks. 5 million! That's a staggering number.
It really is. And this leads directly into Larson's proposed Social Security 2100 Act. This is a significant piece of potential legislation. It aims for a 2% across-the-board benefit increase. That would be the first general increase like that since the Nixon administration.
Wow, first since Nixon.
Yeah. And critically, it proposes changing the cost of living formula, switching from the current CPIW to the CPIE.
Explain that difference again, CPIW versus CPIE.
Sure. The CPIW, that's the Consumer Price Index for urban wage earners and clerical workers. It heavily weights things like gas, transportation, work clothes, costs associated with working. The CPIE, for the elderly, puts more weight on things seniors actually spend more of their budget on: healthcare, prescription drugs, doctor visits, housing costs, utilities.
Things that disproportionately eat up a senior's fixed income.
Precisely. The argument is that the CPIE better reflects the actual inflation seniors experience. The act also includes poverty protection, aiming to ensure no one retires into poverty via Social Security. The potential impact: benefits could rise by maybe $300 to $500 per month for millions. That would dramatically change the quality of life for so many. Think of that retired grandmother in Ohio we mentioned. Her check might finally cover her basic needs.
But here's where that political divide really comes into sharp focus, right? You have the Trump administration's budget proposals raising concerns about potential cuts, particularly to disability benefits, versus Democrats like Larson pushing hard for expansion.
Absolutely, and this connects directly to the inflation squeeze people are feeling. Grocery prices alone are up something like 21% in just a few years. Meanwhile, the projected CLA is only 2.7%.
That gap is huge. It's massive. It perfectly illustrates how inadequate the current adjustments are for covering seniors' real living costs. And it really highlights this concept of two Americas.
Yeah.
You have the wealthy, who maybe don't rely much on Social Security, and then you have the working class, who depend on it for their very survival. And to propose making them work longer under these economic pressures, it feels, frankly, quite insulting to many people.
Okay, so let's shift gears now. Let's transition to a topic that, well, it always gets people talking: the reemergence of stimulus check discussions. Could more direct financial relief actually be on the horizon? Former President Donald J. Trump has been making comments about tariff rebate checks. He describes them as a kind of dividend, coming from what he calls tremendous numbers of money flowing in from tariffs on imports. He suggested the possibility of returning, quote, a piece of it back to the American people. His argument being, you've paid higher prices because of past policies, because of inflation, so why not get some of that tariff money back?
Right. It's an interesting framing. He did note it's just a possibility right now, and that the full flow of this tariff money might still be years away. But the idea, the seed, has definitely been planted.
And based on how these things usually work, if these tariff rebate checks did move forward, they'd likely target low and middle income Americans, mirroring the pandemic-era checks.
So similar income thresholds, like individuals under $75,000, married couples under $150,000.
Probably something like that, yeah. With additional payments for dependents, that seems the most likely model.
And it's not just talk from the former president. There are actual legislative efforts happening now. Senator Josh Hawley introduced the American Worker Rebate Act.
Yes, I saw that.
It proposes $600 for every adult, $600 for every dependent. So a married couple gets $1,200. A family of four, for example, could see $2,400.
Okay, $600.
But there's already debate brewing, isn't there? Economists, advocates saying $600 is simply not enough. They're pushing for $2,000 checks instead, arguing that's what's needed to really address the current cost of living pressures.
That debate is definitely happening. And it's interesting how quickly that IRS rumor about $13,390 stimulus checks spread recently. Remember that. The claim was these checks were coming in August 2025 for low-middle-income households, similar eligibility rules.
I do remember that. It was everywhere for a minute.
And the IRS flat out denied it, stated very clearly no such payment is scheduled.
Right. But the kicker, which I find fascinating, is how many people seemed skeptical of the denial. Why do you think that rumor took hold so strongly even after the IRS debunked it?
I think that widespread belief, even in the face of denial, it just reflects how desperate Americans are for any kind of financial relief right now.
Yeah, that makes sense. People want to believe it.
Exactly. Families are undeniably stretched thin. We see it everywhere. Rising housing costs, utility bills soaring, food prices. Don't get me started. Credit card interest rates through the roof, all while corporate profits are hitting record highs. That contrast is stark. So the argument for tariff rebates becomes quite compelling in that context. If Americans are shouldering higher costs on imported goods because of tariffs, then it makes intuitive sense to many that some of that money should be returned directly to them. It's framed not as charity, but as getting back a slice of the pie they helped bake, so to speak.
Okay, so putting it all together, what happens next on this front? What should people be watching for?
Well, several things. On the legislative side, Senator Hawley's American Worker Rebate Act needs to gain traction. It'll face debate, political fighting in Congress. That's step one.
Then there's the White House position. Will Donald Trump continue to push this idea of tariff rebates? Will it become a campaign issue?
That's definitely something to watch. And of course, keep an eye out for any official statements from the IRS and the Treasury. They are the ultimate source for confirming if any payment is actually happening.
Ignore the rumors. Wait for the official word.
Precisely. And finally, public pressure. It really matters. Voters demanding specific amounts, that $2,000 versus $600 debate that can absolutely influence political calculations and outcomes.
Okay. So let's try and recap this whole deep dive then. We've covered the significant new SNAP work requirements, their potential human impact, especially on that 55-64 group, and how those changes fit into a larger legislative strategy. We dug into the ongoing Social Security debates, raising the retirement age versus the follow the money arguments. We looked at potential reforms like Larson's Social Security 2100 Act and the frankly, inadequacy of the current CLA against real inflation.
Right. Big picture issues there.
And finally, we unpacked these active discussions around tariff rebates and stimulus checks. From Trump's comments to Hawley's bill and those IRS rumors that showed just how much people need relief, it really underscores how all these policies are interconnected, shaping the economic landscape for millions.
Exactly. These aren't just separate issues floating around. They're tangled together, fundamentally shaping the economic reality for so many Americans. It truly highlights why it's so important to stay informed, stay proactive, and understand how these changes directly impact your own financial well-being and the stability of your community.
Absolutely. And as we close out this deep dive, here's maybe a provocative thought for you, our listener, to consider. Given all these economic pressures we've discussed and this critical juncture for so many fundamental programs, how should America prioritize its spending and its support for its citizens? What's the most impactful step you believe should be taken right now to ensure stability and dignity for everyone, especially when so many core programs seem to be at a crossroads? Something worth mulling over. Thanks for joining us on The Deep Dive.